listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
And we are live from America and just outside the Matrix. It is time once again for the show that brings you the truth behind the headlines, and have been bringing it to you for a while on some stories. I'm investigative journalist Lee Stranahan. I'll be gloating in a moment on the backstory. And I'll tell you why I'm gloating, Rod, because we've been saying on the show, and to some extent we were going out on a limb, because, you know, it's always hard to predict the future. But we've been telling our audience here on the show that this idea that Russia was about to invade Ukraine was a lie, right? We've been saying that since November, very consistently on this show. Correct?
Yeah, even before that, so yeah.
Yeah. As soon as it started to come up, and it was not some knee-jerk defense of Vladimir Putin, forgive me, or anything like that. Looking at the facts, the way the story was being reported was a lie. They were not troops on the border, right on the border, as it was described in many media outlets. And the idea that they would just invade Ukraine was based on absurdity. And whenever they talk about it, they could never, did you notice this in all the reporting, Rod? They could never pinpoint exactly why Russia was going to invade Ukraine. Did you notice that?
It's because Putin's evil.
Right. That's literally what it came down to. It came down to, you know what they did? They didn't even say he's evil. They said he's like messed up in the head. Like, did you see all the stories were saying, well, Putin wants power and he wants to show he's a tough guy? Did you see those stories?
Yeah, I saw some of those stories that were describing why he wants to invade Ukraine, pretty much saying he's a dictator who just wants to own all of Eurasia. But, I mean, that's crazy.
Yes, and it was crazy. Now, the reason I'm gloating about it, let me introduce the show, then I'll explain the gloat. Because we were right, and now the media's admitting we were right without admitting we were right. But it's very clear right now what's going on. We had a great show today put together for us. First off, in our first hour, Tom Nichols, author, always has stuff very interesting, knows a lot of detail. We'll be talking about concerts. I'll put it like this. With the problems we had at Astroworld and places like that, would you want a concert? Would you want to go to a concert whose initials were MIA? I'm just saying. That stands for missing in action as well, right?
Right. Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're saying. And yeah, but these people, and we're talking about the politicians, they want money at all costs, even if it means people's lives. So they're willing to take the risk.
Well, also we're talking about an author who was very influential to me back when I first read her work a long time ago, Camille Paglia. And Camille Paglia is apparently not politically correct enough, and they want to get rid of her. We'll talk about that with Tom as well. Then in the second hour, we always love it when people have experience with stuff. And we have a first-time guest who's up in Ottawa, where the trucks are. Adam Sues, that's the correct pronunciation, correct?
Yeah, I believe it's Suze, and I believe he's in Alberta. He's in Alberta right now, or Alberta, Canada.
He's in Canada, but he's been covering the story of what's going on, and you know it is moving. Did you see the bridge from Detroit to Windsor? The Windsor Bridge. Did you see what's going on there? Did you see that footage?
Yeah, and I believe he's also covering that because I believe the police are involved with that. So it's not necessarily the truckers doing it, but the police are involved as well.
No, but basically, I did see a lot of trucks. Jim Hoffman came up on it, had some footage, and there were a lot of trucks. And basically, the the bridge that goes from Detroit over to Windsor. I've been across that bridge any number of times. The bridge that goes from Detroit over to Windsor is completely blocked, but we'll be talking to first-time guest Adam Sues from the Rebel, Ezra Levant's sort of the Canadian Breitbart, eh? Kind of. You know what I'm saying? The Rebel, I think that's, you know, if you called Rebel the sort of Canadian Breitbart news, that's fair. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think they represent the conservatives up there in Canada. That might be different here in America, but a different viewpoint.
Yeah, but also they've had Laura Loomer used to be over at Rebel. They've had a lot of people over there.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, and this is one time Laura called me and she was crying. She was upset because they kind of shut her down a little bit at the Rebel. So, but that's how Laura rolls. You know, she pushes the edge of things. And as our guest co-host today, it being a Wednesday, Carrie Smith will be joining us in the second hour as guest host. That's the show. You know what, Rod? I'm going to let you do it. Say the name of the show. I'm going to give you the boom, sir. I will hand you the ceremonial boom. Go ahead.
On the backstory.
It felt like the boom had a little extra oomph there. It felt like they gave you a little more boom than I even get. But that was a good boom. Admit it, right? That was good.
Yeah, that's that equity the Biden administration's giving around. So yeah, I deserve a bigger boom. It is.
Yes, and we'll be talking about that. Apparently, Camille Paglia, who's a lesbian, is not queer enough, or whatever. I'm just saying, she's not, because she's Italian, Paglia, you know. But that doesn't count. You need to be more than that. She needs a little more. She needs to get to a tanning booth or something to be more of color. But we'll talk to Tom Nichols about that. But here's why I'm gloating. The New York Times ran a headline this morning. Did you see this headline? I posted it on Twitter. Did you see it?
Yeah, I saw it.
So the New York Times ran a headline that said, in big, whatever that font is that they use, the serif font that they use, Vladimir Putin is on his own timetable. And I danced around the room, not literally, because that would be disturbing to watch, but no one needs to see that. But in my head, I took a victory lap because I knew that headline, let me parse that out for people. Number one, the same way the Biden administration announced that they weren't going to say imminent no more. Remember that last week? Jen Psaki said that. They're not going to call it an imminent attack. That headline from the Times, well, Vladimir Putin's on his own timetable, is the Times trying to pirouette away from their own reporting. And they're basically saying at that point, okay, so it's not imminent. You know, he's Putin. He's crazy. He's power hungry. He's on his own timetable. He's not going to invade right away. He's going to he's going to stretch it out. He's like a cat with a mouse in the corner, right? That's sort of what they're implying, because they still have to insult him. But I'll tell you what else it tells me, because the Time is like the house rag for the deep state. It's like one of those, I'll put it like this. If you read the Times carefully, you'll occasionally see they talk about what's in the lunchroom at Langley. They just say today's the tuna fish special or whatever. That's how much of a house rag it is for the deep state. So the Times saying that tells me, do you know what it tells me, Rod? It tells me that the U.S. is not going to provoke and do some sort of false flag immediately. Because what they're doing is, I don't know what the opposite of cushioning a blow is. because they're not trying to cushion a blow. They're trying to cushion the lack of a blow. And that's not dirty, by the way. So get your mind out of the gutter. I'm saying they're trying to cushion on nothing. Does that make sense, Rod? They know nothing's happening.
Yeah, no, I'll agree with you on that.
And so what that tells me, one of the reasons I'm happy about this, because if I seem a little spazzy, first off, I am, admittedly. But also, if I seem a little spazzy, it's because I really was happy. I was like, okay, we're not going to have a war immediately. But the Biden administration, these people aren't backing down completely. Does that make sense? I don't think, a real victory lap is when the Times headline says, United States recognizes the will of the people in Crimea. That's victory. That's not happening. And I don't know if that's ever going to happen. And I'll just ask you, Rod, seriously. Can you picture the United States ever recognizing that the people of Crimea voted to rejoin Russia? There was no invasion. There were no little green men. There was nothing like that going on. They actually were happy and are happy. Right? Do you think the U.S. is ever going to acknowledge that, Rod? What's your take? Rod?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I can now. But you'd mysteriously vanished. The Times did something to you. But, Rod, what do you think? Do you think we're going to acknowledge the people of Crimea's will at any point? See, now I can't hear Rod. So apparently the Times really doesn't want Rod to talk about this, because every time we go to Rod, there's no Rod there. So we'll see what's going on with that. But I think it's going to happen eventually. I'll answer my own question. Why not? I think they're going to have to do it eventually. Because the people of Crimea ain't going nowhere. They're in Crimea. They're not leaving. And Russia is not going to betray, Vladimir Putin will not betray the people of Crimea and say, here's the thing. Most adoption agencies, and again, I've never adopted, so I don't know this for sure, but I don't think they have a return policy. Does that make sense, Rod? You see what I'm getting at? Or is Rod completely gone? I'm not hearing Rod, but I'm still on, correct? Okay. Okay, good. So most adoption agencies, as far as I know, as I say, they don't have like a 60-day return policy where if you adopt a beautiful child, you bring him home, and you decide you don't like it, can we get another one? I don't think they let you do that. In the same way, I don't think there's a return policy on Crimea. I don't think there's any point where Vladimir Putin's going to go, we think we can do better. Yes, Sebastian, Crimea's got a warm water port in the Black Sea, but I was looking at some pamphlets showing the Bahamas and the white sandy beaches they have down there. I think we can do better. So we've offered whoever's in charge of Cuba now, I don't know specifically. It's not a Castro anymore, I don't think. But maybe they do a beach swap or something. I don't think he's going to do that. So Crimea is part of Russia. That's not changing. They're there to stay. So really, the only thing is the U.S. is either going to acknowledge it or not. And eventually, as all the other countries, and you watch, I'll bet the U.S. is the holdout. They're going to be like the last one to acknowledge it. The U.S. is going to be the one who won't do it. Everybody else will do it. You watch. And some people are saying, we talked about Emmanuel Macron meeting with Putin and saying yesterday, he's not going to attack Ukraine and how that wasn't getting reported. A lot of people are seeing, because that was also a big anniversary. It was like the 30th anniversary of the time, and when Charles de Gaulle, when he was running France, went over. And some people are saying that it was symbolic. And Putin mentioned it in his address, saying it was a historic, it was an anniversary. But some people are saying that with what Macron's saying, it's the end of NATO. Have you heard that, Rod? See, I just heard some clicking. It sounds like possibly Rod's been eaten by a giant bug, a mandible, something like that. I'm not sure. Is that a bug or is that a part of your leg? I'm not sure. I don't know, really. But,
Can you hear me now?
yeah, there we go. Hey, Rod, welcome back.
Yeah, something happened to my headphones. I don't know what happened to my headphones. But anyway, no, I was answering your question. I was saying, I said eventually they're going to acknowledge it, but I'm saying like maybe like 20 years from now, when it's not even gonna be a current events type thing. You know what I'm saying?
Right. So we agreed without knowing we were agreeing. You'd locked your answer in already. You didn't even use your phone a friend, but you'd locked your answer in already. And that's what I said. Eventually we'll do it because we'll have to, right?
You'll be well, you know, I don't want you to be crippled or anything, but I mean, you'll be old, you'll be a little bit more hunchback. You know what I mean? You'll be older, and you'll be that guy who's saying "I told you so," but you know, it'll be like 20 years from. It'll be like 20 years from now.
If I'm alive 20 years from now, which I'm hoping, but I'm not betting, if that makes sense. You know, I'm just saying, I've got a shelf life. I found my expiration date. I was looking at the back of my neck in the mirror, and I noticed I've got a use-by date, and it's passed. So, but let me say this, Rod, as well. Have you heard about people saying this could be the end of NATO, that NATO could break up after this?
I mean, you could tell that there's infighting with NATO with this whole Ukraine situation, and pretty much us and the UK trying to pressure other NATO allies to start a war with Russia, and them not being suicidal. So, but I don't think it'd be the end because I think it's too much money and other things involved. I mean, it's just conflict we're seeing, but I don't think it'd be the end. That'd be great if it was, but I don't think it's the end of NATO.
Well, you know what? I will say this. If Trump gets elected again, that could be the end of NATO right there. Because he's not, one of the reasons they hate Trump's guts is that he doesn't like NATO, and I don't even know why he doesn't like NATO.
I think because they charge us so much more than other countries. He's a businessman, so he just, you know, why are they charging us so much, and then they're not chipping in their share? So he's just looking at it as a business transaction. One
of the problems with NATO, one of the reasons they could be breaking up, is they are kind of pointless. In other words, and I think what Trump realizes is that if we're going to antagonize Russia, which is basically the only point of NATO, he's saying we can do it cheaper. We can get a low bidder on antagonizing Russia. Maybe, you know, whatever. Pompeo would be pretty good at that. Also good at clearing out your local buffet. But Mike Pompeo, maybe we'll just keep him around, put him back in to antagonize Russia. If we're going to have somebody, it's cheaper than NATO. So, but I am hearing people say that. Now, I'm not willing to go that far myself. I was, and I'll just explain something I said earlier. I said it was a little bit, because you don't know the future. I'll tell you what it reminded me of. You remember when the weapons of mass destruction thing was going on with the run-up to the Iraq War? It seemed like it was a bunch of BS. Okay? Okay? You remember that bit, Rod? Correct? Sharif, I see you on the line. I'll get to you in 1 second. But here was the thing. Even though it seemed like BS, you didn't know for sure for a while. So you would have felt dumb. And dumb's not the right word. Dumb is what you do when you can't find your car keys. So if in fact Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. By the way, the reason I stumble on that is there was an HBO film called Weapons of Mass Destruction years ago, and I worked on it. I did visual effects on it. And so whenever I start to say weapons of mass, I want to say distraction because that was the film I worked on. And so I've said that phrase myself a lot. But weapons of mass destruction. When that turned out to be BS, so the same thing here. I would have had, and again, egg on your face is not the right term to use if something had happened and start World War III. Oopsie. Oops. You don't want to say that. But if Putin, I don't know Putin. I didn't have any inside knowledge. There was no memo that went around Sputnik. By the way, this is Vladimir Putin. Just want to let you know I'm absolutely not going to invade. Scout's honor. Cross my heart. Pinky swear. There was nothing like that. So I don't know. Maybe he is, maybe he was. I don't know. But it sure didn't seem like that to me. And I've said before, I like predictions that are layups. The reason I'm good at predictions is I don't go out on a limb and make predictions. I don't like to predict things that aren't a sure thing. I'm one of those people who, I like predictions like the sun will come up tomorrow. But this one really did seem like one of those ones that was obvious. Then I started to get a little nervous because I thought that the U.S. was going to provoke Russia. And when the U.S. started talking about a false flag and crisis actors and all that, I was a little like, wow, the U.S. is acting especially wacky. And by the way, Sergei Lavrov, I believe, said yesterday about our sanctions that we've lost America. That's you and me, Rod. That America's lost all touch with reality. And you know what? If people want to understand how Russia sees us, I think that's a good summation of it. They see us as a country that's lost all touch with reality. And you know what may have done that is Russiagate. But, Rod, if Russia, in fact, if you and I went out for shots of vodka with Vladimir Putin sometime, and we said, okay, President Putin, what do you really think of us? Not just America, but Rod and I specifically. And he threw back some Stoli and said, you've lost all touch with reality. Not about us, but about the U.S., Rod. Could you blame him? Can you blame Russia for thinking the U.S. has lost all touch with reality?
Oh, no, not at all. I think it's obvious to people, the Russian people or people like that who have some type of values or some type of creed. You know, the Russians have a deep history that they hold on to. And here in America, we don't have it seems like our history's all jumbled up and they're rewriting it as we speak. Our present seems confusing and our future seems even worse. So we're in a weird state of affairs.
Well, I was thinking about that actually today, and I didn't tweet it because I thought it might be too edgy for Twitter. So, of course, I'm going to do it on the radio where it's even more edgy. So I'm aware of there's such a thing as the FCC. Tarif, I'll get to you right after this vaguely weird, dirty thing I'm about to say that's absolutely true. But I was thinking about us as a nation, Rod. Now, do you know anything about the initiation ceremony required to get into the Yale Secret Society Skull and Bones?
Oh, yeah. And it's actually a little funny that you bring that up. I actually used to have a girlfriend at the University of Penn, and I partied at the fraternity house where the Skull and Bones, if you ever see Transformers 2, there's like a little party at a fraternity place over at Penn, and that's supposedly the Skull and Bones thing, initiation site or whatever. That's what I was told.
Okay, well, now, do you know what they say they make you do to get into Skull and Bones?
It's a lot of, it's a lot of borderline homosexual activity.
Well, there's also self-stimulation. What I've heard is, and again, I've never been admitted in Skull and Bones. Imagine if you failed this test. That'd be embarrassing. But I didn't fail the test. They didn't even ask me. But at Skull and Bones, what I've heard is they make you lie in a coffin in front of everybody else, all the other dudes there, and pleasure yourself. I think I can do that and not get in trouble with the FCC. Right? You've heard that, correct?
Oh, yeah, I've heard that.
Okay, now so here's something about our country. We talk about American exceptionalism, and I know that people who are from here, like you and I are, you feel like you live in a special country. So, you know, everybody, you felt that times like America is unique, right? You know what I'm saying? You know, I've certainly had patriotic pride at some points. Then I was thinking about Skull and Bones, because someone put up on Twitter a picture of George W. Bush, Skull and Bones member, and John Kerry, his opponent, was also a Skull and Bones member. But not the only president who was a member of Skull and Bones. George H.W. Bush, his father, was also a member. Now, just for a second, Rod, think about your old man, your dad, pleasuring himself in a coffin. Just for a second. You can get it right out of your head. But it's disturbing even for that brief second, right? You don't want to think about that, do you?
No, not at all.
Right. And it's weird. So here's what we know. Our exceptional country, the United States of America, God bless the USA. One thing we know is that we've had a few presidents who were, you know, as Bruce Springsteen said, in the dumps with the mumps as the adolescent pumps his way into his hat. I'm just saying, they were blinded by the light in a coffin. We know that about our leaders. Do you think other countries have that, where they know for sure that their leader... Could Boris Johnson even fit in a coffin? And I don't, you know, again, I don't want to think about that. I'm just saying, isn't that kind of weird in American history that if the rumors about Skull and Bones are true, and if they're not true, Skull and Bones is not going out of their way to correct those rumors. They've let that one hang, so to speak. Again, that's not dirty. But if that's what's happening, think, we've had leaders of this country who've done it in a coffin. That's kind of weird, don't you think, Rod? That makes us exceptional, but not in the way most people think. Correct?
Yeah, no, that's that leaves us in a I don't even know the words to put it, a peculiar place to say we're very exceptional. You know what I mean?
Yes. And can I just ask everybody, can we never do that again? Can we never have a Skull and Bones president? Can we just cut that off? Please? Now, we only have a couple minutes here, but I want to make sure we get to Tarif. Tarif, what is on your mind? Sorry you had to sit through that, Tarif.
All right, it's all right. First, I'd like to say free Julian Assange, free donors, and hashtag no more. Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks raised for Julian Assange's defense over $50 million. The truckers in Canada, the trucking tow companies that lift heavy loads do not want to pull the trucks away. I mean, they don't want to take the contracts from the city to pull the trucks away, so they're declining the city requests in Ottawa, Canada, to remove the trucks. So the tow truck services is with the truckers in Canada and other parts of Canada as well. My last comment is German diplomats, some German diplomats and American diplomats is thinking that if once they put sanctions on Russia, China is going to back away. Alex McCurry was talking about China is not going to back away. They got Russia's back, so that cubics of feet of billions of cubic of gas is going to go from Germany to China. Is going to be redirected, not only China but India as well. So they put too much.
No, that's a great point. And Tarif, let me mention one thing to follow up on that. Great call as usual. But to follow up on that, they're saying that the reserves of gas in Germany are quite low. Did you see that, Tarif?
No, I'm just finding out about that.
Yeah. So in other words, this is having an effect. And right, and I agree completely with what you said, Alex said. There's this thing with Russia and China. How does the song go? Solid as a rock, right? That this thing with Russia and China, the way they're talking, you know, we'll see. There could be a merger into the works. So that's all I'm saying. That'd be a very big country, wouldn't it, Rod?
No, I think it's obvious that they're becoming friends out of necessity, just because, like we just talked about, we're not living in reality, and we're not putting things in perspective. You know, we just think we can just bully everyone around.
Yeah, here's the thing. If you're on PCP and you don't know what's going on, you may feel strong, but you're not perceiving things. Maybe America's on PCP because we're kind of acting like it, like a bully, but we have no idea what's going on. And China and Russia are, like you say, have made statements that make it very, very clear that they're very, very solid. So nothing's happening to change that. Again, that's an easy prediction. But coming up right after this short break, our friend Tom Nichols, frequent guest on the show. We love having Tom on. He knows a lot of stuff. I've already learned something about Altamont today that I didn't know, and I thought I knew a bit about Altamont, where someone was killed while Stones were playing. But Tom Nichols is such a good researcher. I've actually already learned something about Altamont. We'll talk about concerts and other stuff with Tom Nichols right after this short break on the best damn radio show in the world. It's The Backstory.
Want to talk? Get in touch with us at radio@sputniknews.com.
So, Sean, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, Bob, that's easy. I want to talk about the need to stop the development of self-driving cars.
Again, Sean, you're driving me nuts. I think the self-driving car thing's already out of the gate.
No. It's never too late. See, now the leading experts in the field, I mean, just pick one, whichever one, leading experts have repeatedly warned us about the dangers of artificial intelligence. Look, I'm telling you, man, we have to stop the robots by any means necessary.
I see what you did there.
Yep.
Tune into our show By Any Means Necessary daily from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Radio Sputnik. And don't forget to call in at 3:20 p.m. to our studio number 202-521-1320.
And if you miss us live, check us out on SputnikNews.com, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date on the latest political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us.
Feeling kind of blue, but maybe also kind of red, and kind of purple, and kind of alone? You've got a friend on Radio Sputnik. Tune into Political Misfits from 12 to 2 Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, for news, politics, and culture without the two-party bias. Catch us daily on 105.5 in Washington, D.C., or 102.9 or 104.7 in Kansas City. Or find us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your news.
Are you bored? Are you lonely? Do you need a hug? Well, we can't give you that, but we can keep you up to date on Radio Sputnik.
And we are back. You're listening to the best damn radio show in the world, the show that brings you the truth behind the headlines on 105.5 FM, AM 1390. I'm Lee Stranahan. This is, in fact, The Backstory. Joining us now, great friend of the show, very knowledgeable person. And I think, Tom, hey, Tom, how you doing?
Hi, Lee. How are you? I'm fine.
I'm good. Now, Tom Nichols is joining us. Tom, would it be fair to call you a prolific writer? Because I was going to say that, but I don't want to label you something you wouldn't label yourself. You seem very prolific to me.
Well, that's what people tend to say when their guard is down. So, sure, that's fine. Yeah, that's great.
Yes. No, because you've written, how many books have you written? I forget the number. It was a lot.
I've written 15, but, maybe...
That's what I thought, actually.
But it's 15, yeah.
So I thought if I had to say a number, I would have said 15. But then I said to myself, that sounds too even. You know what I'm saying?
That's why I put another one out. You're exactly right.
Well,
yeah.
Then it'll be differently even. It'll be a prime number, and it would mess me up that way. Because I'll go, wait.
Which I think are sound.
Yeah. Once you get to 17, then 17's a weird number. I don't want to get mathematical on people. But 15 is equally divisible by 3, 555, nice and easy. 16 is 4 4s. 17, what the hell is that? That's a weird one.
Numerology.
You see what I'm saying?
A lot of mystical things to say about 17. I've always liked the number 7, though, I have to admit. And I think it is a kind of a mystical number.
It is. Well, the other one that's weird like that, of course, is 23.
Yeah, that seems to me to be special in some way. It's a great age to be, although it's a very confusing age, I think. 23. I used to hear stories about how men at age 23 tend to have a lot of problems. It's a very pivotal year for a lot of males.
Well, I agree with, it's weird you say that. I agree with that 100%. I had the weird experience. When I was 23, I was dating a 31-year-old. And 31 is a weird age for women.
Yes.
Because you're a little over 30. I'm just saying. And if you're not married by that point, you kind of feel like maybe something's gone wrong. And then when I was 31, I was dating a 23-year-old. And so you've got two people, a 23-year-old and a 31-year-old, who are both at weird stages in their lives. And I had that twice, coming and going, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I agree with that. Very interesting point, Tom. Now, also very interesting, you get a couple of great new articles that I wanted to talk about. And one, the article about Live Nation, we'll get to in 1 second. But let me start with what's going on at UPenn.
Yeah.
And stuff that's going on even with the swim team. But the thing that was interesting to me when I was reading about this is Camille Paglia. And I think the G's silent. I think it's like Paglia.
Paglia.
Is the proper pronunciation.
I've been back and forth with that pronunciation myself. So Paglia, I think, is correct.
So, yeah, but you know what I mean. It's one of those things where it looks like, to my American eye, Paglia, because there's a P-A-G, but I think it is, I've heard her pronounce it. She's someone who I've enjoyed her work for decades. I was pretty young when I read her, and I just found her to be an independent thinker, and I liked that. And she would make me think. She had one great essay, and I'll just mention this, then we'll get on to what's going on with her. But and I'm not a woman, obviously, and she is, but she was talking about in this essay that she was talking to a male student of hers, and that he was talking about he'd been to Egypt and he camped out by the pyramids in the desert. And she thought to herself, I could never do that. That sounds great. I can't do that. Because she's a woman. And she would face... No, go ahead, Tom. What were you saying?
No, I mean, that is true. You know, she couldn't do it in that culture as a woman, camp out.
That's right. And it made me, for just a split second, go, yeah, she is right. I get it. And that would suck. And so that's one of those areas where there are differences between men and women. And I don't know how to define that one, but I thought it was a very interesting point that's always stuck with me. That women and men aren't the same, which is why all the gender stuff that's going on now, where it's just out of reality.
Yes, totally out of reality. It's a false narrative, Lee. It's something that's not real, but it's being forced upon us. At least as far as athletics goes. I mean, I've learned to accept this transgender thing, of course, although I think it's probably true in a lot less cases than are being talked about. I mean, I object to giving puberty blockers to children, for instance, who haven't even reached sexual maturity or who are light years away from sexual maturity. I mean, children who one day want to be a princess, want to be a fireman, want to be one of Santa Claus's reindeers, and so it wouldn't be all that unusual for them to say that they want to be the opposite gender. I used to dress up as a Carmelite nun when I was 6 years old. Now, does that mean that I had a gender dysfunction? I don't think so. I was just having fun, and it was great theater. But I think that this UPenn thing is very, very problematic because, I mean, here we have an obviously very, very tall she, and with male limbs, huge feet, male body parts, and he's competing against biological women, and he's beating them every step of the way. And there are people who just swallow this new reality without any questioning of it. And I just can't wrap my arms around it, you know? It's difficult.
Well, and, you know, there's a few things. Let me just mention something random that I read today. It's just a random statistic. And I don't have a lot on it, but it's a thought, and it was interesting to me. They said that in this current generation, people who are Gen X or whatever Gen X I think is old now, so it's whatever the current millennial generation is. They said that 40% of them identify as LGBTQ. 40%.
But you see, the whole problem is the Q at the end, which is a big, wide open door. Does that mean that they've had a same-sex experience? No. You get a lot of progressively minded metrosexual men, for instance, who are all for everything LGBTQ, and they're extremely liberal theoretically, but they've never had a same-sex experience. I don't quite get it. You can be sympathetic, you can be empathetic, you can support your gay friends, but and maybe they feel that identifying as LGBTQ is like putting on a major badge of support. It's like more than just verbal support. It's actually they're in there for the so-called fight. Although, frankly, I think, you know, gay and lesbian issues at this point have been thoroughly mainstreamed. They're in the culture as part of it. And, you know, except for a few weird local cases here and there, there's no mass discrimination going on. And as I look over the movement, of course, this whole transgender thing has been growing slowly over many, many years. And it used to be just a kind of a marginal side issue, and now it has virtually taken over the gay and lesbian movement. You can't read any gay magazine without spotting a feature or something about transgender issues. And it's still, as I think I've said on your show before, the majority of gay men, I think, do not identify with it at all, and there's still a lot of confusion. A lot of people still don't understand it. They accept it because, nobody wants to judge anyone. I wouldn't dislike someone because they're transgender, but I have issues in terms of athletics and puberty blockers for children. But I have to be honest, understand it.
Well, no, and the other thing, it seems to me the transgender movement, and again, I'm not talking about any individual person because I've known people who are transgender, but I don't identify them as part of the movement. It was an artist I knew back when I lived in Los Angeles. But the movement itself is very aggressively political in a way that I think, I'll put it like this. My brother-in-law from my first marriage is gay. I went to his commitment ceremony 20, 30 years ago. And when he found out I was working for Breitbart News as a reporter, Ken said to me, he said, "Oh, my God, I'm so glad to hear that." He said, "I can't talk to my sisters, including my ex-wife." He said, because they're just liberal kooks. And in theory, because he's LGBTQ or whatever, which he's not, he's G. He's a gay man, right? But Ken was the most conservative of his family, and just in a very common sense way. And the transgender movement seemed to me to be aggressively political. I had friends of mine who were feminists, who said she started a board for women, and the transgender people got involved and were very aggressive at invading the woman's space, is the way she put it at the time. But I've heard similar things from other people. And that was off-putting. But it seems to me like it's oddly political in a way, like they've got I'll put it like this. This is not exactly right, but it seems like they've really got a chip on their shoulder.
Well,
does that make sense?
Yeah, they do. They're extremely aggressive. They're ferociously aggressive in their politicking and in their attacks on who they perceive as their enemies or anyone they perceive as being transphobic. Of course, that can take many different forms, going from extremely light, almost invisible, to the most obvious transphobic things like attacking somebody with violence because they're a transgendered person. I mean, I've had a few run-ins when I used to write for a gay magazine called the Lambda Book Review. I was the spirituality editor, and I had to talk about a book about transgender issues, and I thought that I was sharing something when I then told the story of how I met somebody on a blind date who said he was a man, but it was really a woman who wanted to become a man. So we went through the whole date. She had a binder on, which essentially hid her breasts, and presented herself as kind of a nerdy guy, so you really couldn't tell. But it was only halfway through that she revealed herself. And, I mean, I wasn't angry. I was more fascinated and awestruck than anything else. Like, this whole disguise was just amazing to me. And so we talked the rest of the way. So I wrote about this, but because I used the wrong pronouns here and there in telling the story, I got so much hate mail. And it was like I had murdered a transsexual in Georgia or something. It was just over the top. And at that point, I realized just how mean this political movement can be. Now, of course, I am not transphobic. I mean, and I was amazed at Catelyn Jenner's gracious comments on this UPenn swimmer. I think Leah Thomas is her name. And, you know, Catelyn presented a very good case as to why she should not be swimming with real biological females. So all transgendered people do not think the way they do in this very narrow, mean movement, and it is very, very mean.
and it also seems to me to be humorless in a lot of ways. Like,
yeah,
you know,
absolutely, yes.
Yeah, Andrew Breitbart used to use a term to describe liberals he didn't like as joyless, and I think it's a good phrase. And it reminds me, I had a friend. You know, I mean, I'll put it like this. There are valid jokes to make about stuff. I remember I was at an event with a friend of mine, John, who's gay, who was there. And there was a beautiful woman, very, very, very beautiful woman. And I was looking at her, and John sitting next to me. And I said, oh, my gosh, look at her. And John said, yeah, if you're into that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a good line. That's a good line. And it wasn't, nobody was being put down there. That was just acknowledging that he and I don't quite see things the same way, and in a way that no one was weird about. It was like, okay, and I really don't see the people on the transphobic side. They go after so many comedians. That's part of why I say they're kind of joyless. But what do you say, Tom?
Well, yeah, I mean, anytime you take a political philosophy into your DNA, when it becomes your entire self, when it becomes your church and religion, you become joyless because there's no joy in it. But as for that movement itself, I mean, it's gotten so crazy that now on dating apps, if a transgendered man, for instance, can't get a date with a gay man, they complain and they cite discrimination. And it's almost gotten to the point where if you're not attracted to me, then you are transphobic. So there's this mindset now that says that you have to have sex with a transgender person. And if you don't prove yourself that way, then you're transphobic. And this is occurring more and more. I'm reading about it here and there, and so this is a problem. Of course, you can't force sexual attraction. It's either there or it's not. So I don't know where this movement is going to end up, but I think this huge questioning around this UPenn swimmer, I think it's very, very healthy, and it may be a kind of a watershed moment because people are suddenly not afraid to say, I don't discriminate against transgender people. I have friends who are, but it cannot be this way in athletics. It's unfair. It's giving biological women, it's putting them into an unfair position.
And I also think it's actually unfair to men who just want to win a lot and therefore compete against women. Because why should you have to say you want to become a woman or you are a woman? If you just want to cheat, cheat. In other words, if you don't like, if you know you can't beat other men in swimming, but you think you got a pretty good shot against the ladies, you should be able to just go out and say, you know what? I'm a straight man who just doesn't like losing. That's who I am. And what someone, in other words, I don't see why you have to go through the, I won't call it a charade exactly, but I'll kind of call it a charade. It has nothing, one has nothing to do with the other is the point I make in a weird way with a joke. But is that competing in athletics has nothing to do with it. Now explain what's going on. We've hinted at it, but exactly what's going on at UPenn.
Well, UPenn is a hotbed of political correctness and, you know, over the top. I mean, there's the Penn tenured professor Amy Wax, who has been in the hot lights for a number of years because of her views on race and affirmative action and so-called Asian elites, which I just wrote about for Front Page. And she first came under the microscope, as it were, back in 2006 when she came out against same-sex marriage. Agree with Amy Wax or not, she still has the right to say what she says. And, since 2006, there has been a building resistance to her, and now the pressure is really on to sort of kick her out, even though she's a tenured professor. And Philadelphia City Council has also gotten involved, which is a very unhealthy thing, trying to tell Penn what to do, that it would be to their benefit to do something serious in the form of, like, quieting or censoring Amy Wax. This is just pretty dangerous stuff, I think. So I don't know where this is going to go. It's currently under review. The mayor got involved and voiced his opinion, which is it was in sync with city council. I think 16 city council persons signed on to this letter of condemnation. Only one city council person, a Bobby Hennon of Northeast Philadelphia, a Republican, refused to be bullied into signing this petition. So that takes guts to be the only one standing outside the circle.
And Tom, you mentioned, let me just divert to something you said, but you said you have an article coming up in Front Page. That's David Horowitz's Front Page?
Yes, that was published yesterday. It was on Amy Wax and UPenn.
Okay, yeah, because I'm friends with David. That's why.
Oh, are you really?
That caught my.
That's impressive.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
I've been to his house, and.
Well, that's really friendly.
Yeah. Well, David, because the '60s are a real interest of mine, and David was there, of course, as the editor of Ramparts, and also working with the Black Panthers. The Black Panthers are a real area of study for me. And so knowing David...
Yes.
Like I say, he knows, he's been at Huey's apartment on Lake Merritt and stuff like that. So anyway, you mentioned Front Page. And what's the name of the article? Do you know what that's going to be called?
It's called Defunding the Police. That's what... defunding the police, is that necessary for freedom of speech? I'm paraphrasing now. I've been working on something else all day. So that is the main part of the title. Yeah.
Well, no, and I'll tell you, Tom, we got diverted in this stuff, but it was interesting. And I like to keep the show loose that way. But we got to talk about your Live Nation article as well. That's a very interesting situation. We don't have time right now, but Rod, let's make sure we get Tom back on when we can. Tom Nichols, great appearance and great conversation, as always. Thanks so much to Tom Nichols.
Thank you.
Coming right up, Gary Smith is joining us as the co-host for the final hour today of the best damn radio show in the world, The Backstory.
listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
And we are back live for the second hour, final hour today, as we're halfway through the week. It's a Wednesday. You know that. Did I get the day of the week right today, Rod? Because I screwed it up yesterday. It is Wednesday, correct?
Yep, that's right. It is Wednesday.
Okay, thank goodness. Because, again, I've got an expiration date. But thanks so much to Tom Nichols.
Providing misinformation.
Yeah, no, and it was I thought it was a great conversation with Tom, but we didn't get to his Live Nation article. But it was very interesting, wasn't it, Rod?
Yeah, no, I think it's great for people to hear a different perspective. Tom and his history with dealing with the transgender community and how nasty they've been getting.
Yeah, and it's weird because it is becoming increasingly a political issue, and let's not forget that they were adamantly trying to cancel Chappelle. We're talking about all the stuff going on with Joe Rogan, but it was just a few months ago that they were trying to take out Dave Chappelle for doing what I can only describe as a moving tribute to a transgender person he knew personally who'd taken their own life. And it was a moving tribute to them. And yet they were trying to cancel. Did you see that, Rod? That Chappelle special?
Yeah, no, I saw it, and it wasn't enough that he tried to do a tribute to a friend. It was offensive to them, so he had to be eaten. He had to be taken off of all platforms.
That was the special, The Closer, which I highly recommend. It's another great Dave Chappelle special. That's beyond stand-up to me. That was beyond stand-up. That was theater. That was just brilliant. But there we go. Why don't we... See, I love it when we say stuff like that, and people are like, why don't you have him on the show? Well, because we can't wave our magic wand or whatever. We can't do a Rupert Pupkin and just take him hostage. That's what happened to Jerry Lewis in the movie The King of Comedy, of course, directed by Martin Scorsese, starring Robert De Niro and Jerry Lewis as a talk show host who was kidnapped. Remember that? Did you see that one?
I've actually never seen that one.
It's a very, very interesting movie. It's one of those middle period Scorsese films. It's kind of a comedy, but it's a little too edgy for just a comedy. But we can't. But I'll put it like this. Rod, have you ever turned down Dave Chappelle to come on the show?
No, not yet.
Right. So if Chappelle's not been on yet, it's not our fault, or specifically Rod's fault. By the way, do you know how pissed I would have been if I found out you're like, oh yeah, he keeps calling every week. I just didn't think you want him. I'd be mad, Rod. I'll be honest.
I think the listeners would be mad too. So yeah.
I think you'd be mad at yourself. You'd be going, what was I thinking? Why did I think that would be bad? But anyway, Dave Chappelle, if you're out there driving around, because you're from the area, so if you're driving around, come on the show. We'll treat you fairly, Dave Chappelle. Maybe a little too fairly. We won't even bring up Ben Jealous, right? I shouldn't bring that up with him, should I?
I don't think a lot of people know about Ben Jealous, but yeah, he's just like disappeared off the face of the earth. But, yeah.
Because my friend Andrew Breitbart had an ongoing feud with Ben Jealous, so I could talk to Chappelle. Chappelle was a big Ben Jealous supporter when he was running for governor. You remember that, right? Chappelle was out doing events for Ben Jealous. You remember that?
Oh, yeah, when he was running for governor. I think it was around the same time Trump was running, I believe so.
Yes. And again, I'm not going to... So I wouldn't even... Yay, forget I said anything. You be you. There we go. Kerry Smith is joining us as guest co-host this hour, and first-time guest Adam Seuss from Canada. We think he's in Alberta, but we'll find out when he's on. We got that and more coming up. Kerry Smith's with us right after this on The Backstory. Now, I'm just going to say something about Kerry before we get too far here, Rod. So I was lucky enough to do one of the shows that Kerry and Carter Laren co-host together last Friday, I believe. I was a guest. Hey, Kerry, you're there, right?
Yeah, I'm here. That was great on Unsafe Space.
Yes. And I was lucky enough, but I'll say something, Rod. She's far classier than I am because she was wearing a hat. Now, I don't know hats.
I wear a lot of hats.
And we mean this literally. She was wearing a hat that an older, dignified black woman would not be embarrassed to wear to church, Rod. That's what I'm getting at. It was a big, so picture a big hat. You know, like a church style. You know what I'm saying, Rod, right?
Yeah, no, I've seen Kerry's hats. I've seen her cowboy boots. She's got a nice Western style.
Right, and so Kerry was wearing. Does that hat have a name, like a type?
That one,
or just
that one was. It's just a Western style. It's not one of my Stetsons, but it is a Western style. But you know what, Lee? Guilty confession. We were selling my house, and we had audio recording in the walk-in closet because I had so many boots there in the closet, and also my weapons were there. And so I just wanted to have some kind of recording if something was stolen or what have you during the open house. And the funniest thing we heard on the recording was some guys walked into the closet and then said, "Looks like an old lady lives here."
That's great. Because it was all boots and guns, is what you're saying?
Lots of old lady hats and clothes and boots, yeah. The guns were hidden, but they were in there.
Okay. But it is Texas. So, but that was great. Thanks so much to you and Carter. I really enjoyed being on with you guys, and we always enjoy when you're on and Carter's on. But as I realized last week, we've never had you and Carter on.
Yeah, we only appear in the same place on Unsafe Space.
Do you know what we should do, Rod? Sometime on a Wednesday or a Thursday, because Carter's the co-host every other Thursday, we should have the other one on as a guest. So we'd end up with, like if right now we knew Carter was coming up for a half hour at the bottom of the hour, we'd have Carter and Kerry. Does that make sense, Rod? Schedule-wise?
I think that's too much unsafe space. I don't know if we can handle all of that, but I'll try to figure it out.
Well, let's try it. There is a danger if the streams cross. There's always a danger. Everyone who's seen Ghostbusters knows that. But Kerry, welcome. How you doing? You having a nice week?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm having a nice week. I was gonna come on and apologize. I'm no Dave Chappelle, but I've got jokes today, and I know it's Wednesday, which I think I'm doing pretty good today.
No, yeah, and because yesterday I got the day of the week wrong. You know what it was?
I do that often.
We had Jason Goodman co-hosting, and I do a show with him on Wednesday. Tonight's the night that I do my Patreon show with Jason. So I associate Jason Goodman with Wednesday because we've been doing a show on Wednesday for a long time. So I felt like, well, if it's Goodman, it's Wednesday. But he co-hosts on the show here on Tuesday, so it screwed up my addled brain. And in my defense, I've had a number of strokes. So, the part that can tell what day it is, I don't know specifically if that was targeted by the strokes, but it seems to have gone away. But anyway, So how are things going on your shows with Carter over on Unsafe Space?
It's great. We actually I launched a separate channel for all of our deprogrammed interviews. So anybody who's familiar with us, there's a brand new channel if people want to check it out. It's called Deprogrammed with Carrie Smith, and it's all of the standalone interviews about social justice. So the first one that's up on the new channel is with Billboard Chris, and it actually relates to the topic you guys were just covering. But Billboard Chris, you should have him on sometime. He's a father who travels the U.S. and Canada, and he just talks about gender ideology and children and the age of consent. And he wears a sandwich board, he wears a billboard, and he just tries to have one-on-one conversations with people at colleges and town squares. And he sometimes has conversations. He's also been attacked, as you can imagine. But that was the first one we did, and I thought it was really great. He's a really admirable father.
Now, yeah, that's very interesting. Now, let me ask you a question, because I'm curious about this. You've talked about your experience as someone who was a social justice warrior, and you considered it a cult, and I assume that's one of the reasons you call it deprogrammed, right? That's why we call it that, yeah. There. Okay, here's what I'm curious about. Have you had people who've had similar experiences to you who found your work and then say to you, Carrie, let me tell you my story, and their story is similar, different details, obviously. Are there other people like you is what I'm asking? Or are you a special snowflake?
Yes. That's my favorite thing about what we do, because Carter and I we have some similarities and we have a lot of differences. And he's very interested in talking about philosophy and pushing culture forward. Oh, I'm so sorry. That's my doggy. Hold on 1 second.
Wait, okay, yeah. So Carrie's going to check on her dog, which apparently was getting in her whitey closet. I'm not sure what was happening there, but we'll hear from Carrie when she's back.
I'm so sorry, guys.
It's okay.
Yeah, so I was just saying I have more of an interest in talking to people who are stuck in the cult that I was in. And so I do hear from a lot of those people. Occasionally, there are people I talk to who were in the same cult as me, social justice, who have shows and are out there in the world talking about it. Two of those people are Monique Duson from the Center for Biblical Unity. She was a social justice warrior for 20 years. And another person is Embarrassing Mom, Gracie West. But then there's just average, everyday people. They don't have podcasts. They're not out there speaking with a public microphone, but they've completely changed their life. They've left that social justice world, and they're seeing all the benefits of doing so, in their everyday life.
Now,
and some of those people are my friends now.
Well, and what have you learned from talking to those people? Is there any? And let me ask this: have you ever thought about, or do you do, as a service that you could charge money for, interventions, like where you would be the deprogrammer? They'd bring in Carrie. If you've got somebody who you feel is trapped in social justice warriordom, you come in to save them, basically, against their will, possibly.
Well, I don't know. There's not a magic code to saving someone. I've had lots of people contact me about that. What do I give my girlfriend or my friend or my daughter, et cetera? And there's no winning combination of books to read or videos to watch. But I do provide, what we try to do with Deprogrammed is do so many different kinds of interviews with different kinds of people, some of whom have left that cult, that those can be easily shared. They're free to watch. And then I've had a lot of people watch those interviews or watch interviews I've done, and then that plants a small seed with them. And so, maybe I should set up some deprogramming business. But I don't know if I have a specific set of tools I would give people other than just having conversations.
Well, let me also try to, and I can say this with 2 divorces under my belt, I'm a perfect person to give relationship advice. So Pay attention, everyone. Anybody out there, if you feel like you need to deprogram your boyfriend or girlfriend, get a new boyfriend or girlfriend.
Yeah.
Period. I'm just going to say that. Because once you get to a point where you want to deprogram the other person, and it may be different if you're married. Maybe if you're married, and then the person got into something, whatever, then you might want to stick around there. If you have kids, sure, stick around. But if it's just a boyfriend or a girlfriend, would you agree with me, Gary, that's a bad road when you want to deprogram your boyfriend or girlfriend?
I think the outlook is not good. I know several people who've split up because one person either wakes up from social justice, they were both in it, one of them wakes up and the other one doesn't, or neither were in it and then one of them becomes sort of indoctrinated into it and then they've split up. I only know of one couple that so far that, TBA, the one person has woken up and they're working on it and they're trying to work it out and they do have kids. And if they are a success story, that'll be one couple I know of that was able to overcome it. But it's hard because now you have two completely different worldviews. It's not just a matter of policy opinions like, I believe in yes on this policy, vote no on this policy. It's an entire worldview that's different. Social justice it's like a religion in that way. It's why I call it a cult. It gives you a way of looking at the world, a pair of glasses that you put on, and you view everything through this pair of glasses that tells you the world is based on oppression and based on sex and race, and that everything's about competing with other identity groups for more power. And so everything you look at is filtered through those glasses. And if your partner doesn't have those glasses on, that's really hard.
And also, if you have kids, that'd be tricky because you'd bicker over which genders to raise the kids in, for instance, right?
Right.
And which race should they feel most guilty about being? Let's say one was Greek and one was Scottish. Should you feel more guilty about the Scottish part? Who is the bigger oppressor, the Greeks or the Scots? It's tricky. So I'm just saying, a lot of people get in fights about like where to go to dinner. And that's true. I've heard it in not my relationships, but with other people's, that's the kind of thing they bicker over. And stuff like who's the bigger oppressor class, I can't even imagine. But I will say, you've been on Fault Lines when it was Thomas and Stranahan with my son Shane Stranahan. Shane's mother, my first wife, is very liberal, and she became woke liberal. So at some point after we broke up, I don't quite know. I think I know what happened. I think it was the guy she married. I'll be honest. I think I do know what happened. It is difficult. I feel badly. I've talked about it before for Shane sometimes because he's got a lot of pressure in the job he's in. I try never to pressure him. He can have whatever political beliefs he wants. I don't care. And I've got mine, and I talk about them. And I think I'm reasonable, Carrie. Some may disagree, but I think I'm reasonable. But his mom got into a fight with my brother once because on Facebook, my brother, I think I'm telling the story correctly, he used the phrase hit the road. Like, we're going to hit the road and go to Vegas. And she thought that was triggering.
What?
Right.
Because of the word hit?
Yes. Yes. So, and my brother, who's less political than I am, was baffled by this. It may have been a friend of his. It may have been his brother-in-law. But he was like, and she wouldn't drop it. It was what? Have you ever seen those Facebook conversations where you immediately you get into it and you're like, this is not going to go well, so you want to get out quickly, but you can't. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. You ever had that happen to you, Carrie, where you just can't leave the conversation?
Yeah, but I learned my lesson. I just pull the cord and get out now. I usually say, and I will now allow you to have the last word if you must, and then I leave.
No, I think that's smart. I think that's the only thing you can do. I had someone I've known for 25 years. She was an actress in a film I did, and she jumped on me because I'd said something about. I made a joke about Biden losing his mental faculties, and she was offended by that. And just the idea, and it's not original for me. Have you ever heard anybody talk about how Biden may not have the same mental faculties he had at one point? You've never heard that, have you, Gary?
Of course. But they seem not to have a sense of humor. I know a lot of Trump voters who they liked Trump, but they could also laugh at him. And a lot of people on the left, they don't seem to be able to laugh at Biden or anything that they associate with their tribe. It's this sort of sense of humor is shut down.
No, and we were talking to Tom Nichols about that last hour, actually, that concept, and how my friend Andrew Breitbart used to use the term joyless to describe people sometimes. Why do you think that is, Carrie? You being the resident expert on SJWs. Why do you think that is?
I mean, because I think that social justice ideology, a lot of it is fueled by resentment, and joy is the antidote to resentment. If you're overcome with resentment and envy and looking at what everyone else has and wanting to tear them down to amass more for yourself, your entire attitude. It's the opposite of joy and gratitude. I truly believe that. I didn't know Andrew Breitbart called them that. I call them joy eaters. I have actually someone made me a needlepoint that says "Not today, joy eaters," because they do. They just try to suck the joy out of everything. When I was a social justice person, I felt they instill you with this guilt where you don't want to be called out for exercising your privilege by enjoying anything. So, for example, I had a friend whose daughter posted some graduation photos, and it happened to be the day that everyone in the social justice world was posting the black square. And so she had posted photos with her grandmother at graduation, and then she was piled on by her social justice classmates who said she was exercising her privilege by posting something joyful that day instead of a black square. And they really just don't like anything like holidays. They hate it. If you celebrate 4th of July, Thanksgiving, that's why they publish all these op-eds every year about the appropriate way to have a non-problematic Thanksgiving and how you should confront your patriarchal white supremacist relatives at the Thanksgiving dinner table. I mean, they just have to suck the joy out of everything.
No, they want Yeah, go ahead, Gary.
Well, they just want to make people as miserable as they are. I think misery, that saying, misery loves company.
Now, do you think that that's going to ultimately spell the doom for the SJW thing? Because I'll put it like this. You can only be a shoegazer like that for so long before it gets, and if you don't even have Robert Smith cure hair, if you can't even have a cool haircut, which apparently a lot of them can't. When I saw some of these people getting arrested up in Portland, right? I got to say, and I've had girlfriends who use Manic Panic, so I can deal with hair color. Shane, actually, when he was 8 or 9, I have the photos to prove this. Shane had a green mohawk when he was 8 or 9. And we thought it was cool and it was encouraged. But the people up in Portland, you saw them, right? They had, I don't even know what you call badly dyed hair. It was all faded. It wasn't even like poppy red Manic Panic or something. You could see at one point, it's sort of a faded rainbow of hues. But have you noticed that they don't even have fashion sense anymore, Gary? What's going on?
No, I think it's just it's a very conformist way of showing nonconformity. So it's this rejection of what they consider to be traditional beauty standards. This is what's happening culturally. And they think of themselves as nonconformist, but they're all conforming. They're all dressed the same. I was at a thrift store here in Austin, Texas a few weeks ago, and there were 3 non-binary teenagers in front of me, and they all looked exactly the same. And they all had the same dyed hair, and they all had the same nose ring, and they all had the same tattoos. And they all had the same mask, and they all, you know what I mean? It was like, you guys are the most conforming nonconformists I've ever seen. I mean, it looks like a cult sometimes.
Let me ask you this about Austin. Is Monkey Wrench Books still a thing? Is Monkey Wrench still up there?
Oh, I don't know Monkey Wrench.
Okay,
I don't know
so
that
Monkey
one.
Wrench. Yeah, I used to live in North Loop, just north of the UT athletic fields, on a street called Learland, right up Guadalupe. And so if you know that area, that North Loop area, there was a bookstore called Monkey Wrench. And Monkey Wrench, as you might imagine, was based on the Animal Liberation Front idea of monkey wrenching construction projects and stuff like that. And an avowedly anarcho-communist, whatever, activist bookstore up in North Loop.
I just looked it up. It's still in existence. I'm going to have to go check it out. I know that area. There's a lot of great thrift stores there. There's a great bookstore in Austin for anyone visiting Texas. It's the Austin Public Library Overflow bookstore, and they have all these books that the library no longer wants, and they sell them for $1 for paperbacks and $2 for hardbacks. And I'm talking about beautiful art, hardback art and history books and all kinds of biographies. That's my favorite one.
So this is how old I am. I lived in Austin when there was still a Tower Records downtown. That's how old I am.
Oh, wow.
But you know what? Austin's one of those places, and I'm sure it's still the same. It's like Burning Man. I was at Burning Man in 1997. And if I tell people that now, they go, oh, wow, that's cool. But what I tell them is, in 1997, when I was at Burning Man, all anyone could talk about at Burning Man out on the playa was how Burning Man used to be cool, but now it sucked. So when I moved to Austin, all anyone would talk about is how it used to be good, but now it sucked. And this was back in, I was there for the first Gulf War. I protested at the Capitol in the run-up to the Gulf War, so whatever the hell that was, a long time ago. Late 90s, early 2000s, something like that. And back when Alex Jones had a public access show. Again, that's how old I am. But at the time, all anyone could tell me in Austin is how it used to be great. Apparently, everything sucks once I get there, Carrie. That's what I've learned.
Well, I'm sure things have just been sliding since then, because I'm sure it was a lot better in the 90s. I mean, it was even better when I first moved to Texas 4 or 5 years ago. It was better. It's already changed a lot since then. And we have I actually live up north, and I used to not say where I live, but I don't mind anymore. I live in Georgetown, which is a little historic district community about half an hour north of Austin. So in Austin, they have a slogan. It's Keep Austin Weird. And we are getting ready to launch, my church and some other people in our community, we're getting ready to launch a campaign called Keep Georgetown Normal. And I know that's going to explode some heads. They're going to be getting really upset. Normal is going to be very triggering. But we're really trying to prevent that from happening here.
And you're going to have bumper stickers, right?
Yes.
Because you got to have the bumper stickers, because that's Keep Austin Weird, a zillion bumper stickers. And it is too bad, because like Andrew Bravery used to say about the counterculture, he said, I like the counterculture, I just don't think they should run things. But he got the counterculture, and he liked the counterculture, and I did too. I liked the weirdness in Austin, but
everything's changed. Now the counterculture is normal. That's what's counterculture now.
Yeah, good point. Carrie Smith is joining us now. let's go. You think you're north. We're going to go to Canada right after this short break. Joining us, first-time guest from the Rebel, Adam Sues will be joining us, and we'll be talking about the trucker convoy. Those truckers seem to be pretty joyful, don't they? I think that's one of the reasons that they're pissing off people, Carrie, is they seem to be enjoying themselves with their protests. You notice that?
I agree, yeah. And they know who they are. They're confident.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. Adam Sues right after this on the best damn radio show in the world on The Backstory.
Stuck in traffic? No problem. Stay informed. Stay tuned to Radio Sputnik on 105.5 FM or 1390 AM in the Washington, D.C. area. Need more? Follow us on Facebook or check us out on SputnikNews.com.
When the going gets tough, the powerful want propaganda. But we won't let them cancel the facts. Whether you're woke or drowsy, we know that you can handle the truth, and we're giving it to you every morning. Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan every Monday through Friday from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Your first stop for sanity in a world gone mad.
In a media landscape filled with so-called journalists acting as stenographers for their billionaire bosses, there is a desperate need for news, analysis, and perspectives that buck the status quo and get to the heart of how domestic and international events impact you and me, as well as showing how we can get involved in the struggle to change that status quo. Check out By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik, Monday through Friday from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, to hear the stories and voices that mainstream media refuses to tell you. And join us as we connect the political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us. That's By Any Means Necessary, Monday through Friday at 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on Radio Sputnik.
Hi, I'm political analyst Garland Nixon.
And I'm political scientist, author, and nationally syndicated columnist Dr. Wilmer Leon.
We're the co-hosts for The Critical Hour, airing Monday through Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time here on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C.
We close out your day with a thorough and hard-hitting analysis of the day's top stories, where we bring in brilliant scholars, authors, and investigative journalists from around the world.
And on Fridays, it's panel time, when we do a roundup of the week's most important issues.
Join us to keep up with the world's top stories.
Enjoy an in-depth analysis.
And have a little fun along the way. Listen to our show,
The Critical Hour, Monday through Fridays on Radio Sputnik.
And we're back. It's The Backstory on 105.5 FM, AM 1390 on Radio Sputnik here in the DMV, or there in the DMV. I'm in South Dakota, and it's freezing. So for you in the DMV, which is D.C., Virginia, Maryland, hi, enjoy. You know who's, by the way, I guess it was just like cold out there as well, because I mentioned, now you know who Shane is, right? Sarah, you been on this show?
I think so. I was trying to remember that. I think so, but don't quote me.
Yeah, so Shane used to be the producer on Fault Lines when I was a co-host, and then he took over as host, and now he's left. But I'll tell you, he's riding his bike from D.C. to Austin right now.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's about 1,400 miles away. I talked to him a couple of days ago. He was camping along the way, but he's on his way on a bike to Austin. So speaking of keep Austin weird, that'll be, hopefully it will have warmed up a little bit. Friends of mine in Texas say it's been cold in the past few weeks. Cold. So there we go. And I will say, Texas is home. The hardest rain I've ever seen in my life has been in Texas. Have you ever been in the rain in Texas, Carrie, where it felt like someone was throwing a bucket of water down on top of you?
It's buckets, and it can start and stop so quickly. Like they always say, if you don't like the weather here, just wait 5 minutes. And I've never been in a place that changes so fast.
Now let's take off to the Great White North, shall we? Joining us from somewhere in Canada, we think Alberta, from the Rebel, Adam Sues, first-time guest. Hey, Adam, how you doing?
Hey, great. How are you doing? You are correct. I am in Alberta, and I'm happy to be joining you.
No, we're happy to have you. Thanks so much for coming on. And just tell me, and give it to me straight here, Adam. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Yeah, close enough. Adam Sos. Yeah.
Was Sos, you said?
Sos, yeah.
Sos, forgive me. But you can see where I could make that mistake, right?
And technically, it's a big, long, complicated pronunciation with a bunch of sounds that I no longer can make, but we just go with Sos because it's nice and easy.
Okay, Sos is good. Yeah, no, nothing wrong with that. Now, Alberta, explain to people for whom, and there's plenty of us, we don't know Canadian geography.
Yeah.
So, what we know is you got the French over on the right-hand side. Then a little to the left of them, you got Toronto, you got Rush, bands like that, the Canadian Power Trio, Rush, Lakeside Park, and so on. Then if you keep going, eventually hit the West Coast, and that's Vancouver, and they like their weed up in Vancouver. That's what I know about Canadian geography. So explain to everyone where Alberta is.
Yeah, Alberta. So we are pretty much the out west, right next to British Columbia. So we're very much prairies and Rocky Mountains. Alongside with Saskatchewan, we tend to be deemed the more sort of prairie land conservative area. So generally an area that is largely votes conservative, or at least leans conservative. There are some sort of hotspot cities where there's some liberal or progressive hotbeds, but broadly speaking, it is the Texas of Canada. So our politics tend to be more conservative. Our people tend to be more conservative, and then it kind of makes sense that this movement has kind of sparked from the west, certainly, as it makes its way across Canada. And as you well know, we've got some action down here at the border as well in Alberta.
Well, no, and I forgot the other place that people know about, and I know about too, is Windsor, right across from Detroit. When you're in Detroit, you don't want to stay in Detroit, so I would typically go to Windsor for dinner at Timmy's or something like that. Now, by the way, if I say Timmy's, you know what I'm talking about, Adam, right?
Oh, yeah, double for sure.
There we go. Now, Carrie, do you know what Timmy's is? Let's teach you some Canadian. Timmy's is Tim Hortons. It's a popular donut place. And right, Adam, I mean, that's yep. Tim Hortons is the Canadian donut franchise, right?
Yeah, pretty much. That is kind of the jam. We grab our donuts there and grab our coffees there generally. So yeah, that's I mean, maybe a little bit cliche, but we'll let it slide.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, I'm sure there's something much more modern. I'm saying that ironically, by the way, Adam.
Well, now, love their Timmy's.
So what was going on? Oh, by the way, let me just do this. Adam, Carrie, Adam. Carrie Smith's co-hosting with us right now. Adam.
Hi, Adam.
Nice to meet you.
I was going to say, that's what I heard is culturally, Alberta's the Texas of Canada. That's where you go if you want to get some cowboy boots or go square dancing.
Exactly.
Okay, now, so we'll talk about your square dancing abilities in a second, Adam. But explain to me what's going on in Windsor, because I saw this on the Gateway Pundit. Jim Hoft over there had some great video, and I'm sure you guys at the Rebel have been doing it as well. But because you cover Canada's your beat at the Rebel, really. Ezra Levant, of course, started the Rebel. And what's going on? I saw the Windsor Bridge. It seems like it was getting blocked, and they're not happy about it on the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Company, whatever. What's going on there, Adam?
Yeah, in response to the blockade, the original sort of blockade at the border was at Coutts, which is about 15 minutes away from me here in southern Alberta, and that kind of kick-started it. So we're now seeing some other groups take similar actions, and they're blocking that. We have had some people on the ground there. I'm in the middle of absolutely nowhere here in the prairies, so the information I've been getting is basically what they have, that it was blocked off for some time. There is a report coming out. We are just trying to get to the bottom. Again, this is very much an evolving story, but we're also hearing some reports now that while those blockades, they may be open, in fact, there is some and this is again not confirmed at this point, but that it is in fact now the government in the United States that has shut down those borders as well. So I don't know if that situation has evolved from the bridge there in Windsor, but that we're hearing some things that the folks down here, at least in Alberta, have opened the border, and it's closed from the U.S. government side now. So that is an evolving situation. We do have people on the ground right there at Coutts, and where I'm located, there is basically there's an RCMP, which is our federal police. They have a giant, like 50-car RCMP blockade here. Are all agencies collaborating, and they're not letting anyone through. So effectively, we've got a large encampment in the middle of the highway, about 15 minutes away from that Coutts blockade. So quite a scene here. I'm looking at about 25 police officers right now staring at me. So, and then no lack of trucks honking in the distance. I'm not sure if you can hear that, but definitely a fluid situation here in Canada. But yeah, I'm not on the ground right there in Windsor, so I couldn't give you an up to the moment update on that front.
No, that's just in general trying to figure out what's going on up there. So, Carrie, you have a question for Adam?
I do. I saw on your Twitter you were talking about a legal defense fund for some of the truckers who are choosing to stay at the protest site. Are they being arrested? Could you catch me up on what's happening? Are they now being arrested for protesting?
Yeah, so effectively what happened this morning, the RCMP, or Royal Canadian Mounted Police, federal police, made an announcement basically stipulating that they'd set up a secondary camp location which was intended for protesting, which was legal. Of course, it's far off from the highway on a chunk of land, and no one's going to see it, and it's not going to have any real impact. So the truckers basically here who are protesting scoffed at the concept of being evicted and sent there. So we were told this morning at 1 p.m. RCMP would start moving through the crowd, effectively giving them a warning and giving them time to relocate. That did not happen at 1 o'clock. One officer came over and spoke to some people. They basically said, we're not going anywhere, and they didn't proceed with any further action on that front. Now, that may coincide with our truckerlawyer.ca. We put out a tweet saying that if anyone does get a ticket for protesting or for deciding to stay, we would hire them a lawyer, and we're going to crowdfund that. But it also seems that if there is truth to this rumor that the U.S. government shut down the border, the efforts to clear this up would be somewhat moot because they'd be clearing it up in order to open up a closed border. So those two factors coincided with the RCMP not acting on action against the folks here. I do know that lots of tickets have been issued because by traffic laws per se, there are vehicles stopped on the side of the road. And then I've also heard of people getting a light being too high or a window being too tinted. They're kind of going around doing arbitrary enforcement as a bit of intimidation. But for the time being, it's just a lot of officers standing on one side of a line and then a whole bunch of trucks with flags, farmers, SUVs, all that sort of good stuff piled up alongside the truckers on the other side of the barricade standing in solidarity. The numbers always grow by the evening. I know last weekend there was anywhere from 5,000 to 7,000 people here, literally in the middle of absolutely nowhere with no major towns nearby, just standing in solidarity with the truckers down at the border.
Now, one of the things I heard in the news this morning was that Alberta did get rid of some of the restrictions that they had. They canceled some of the stuff. Do you think it's a result of the protest, or do you think that would have happened anyway, Adam?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it is categorically a result of the protest. They're going to make every effort to stipulate that it is not whatsoever. The fact that other jurisdictions in the world are starting to open up as well, and some other provinces in Canada, clearly gave them a bit of a pathway to do so. But Alberta, our slogan, our motto is strong and free, and it's kind of sad that we're following the likes of California and Quebec and towards freedom. We should be leading the charge on freedom. But very much they've said it's simply a matter of the way things are going. But the way the announcement came, they basically dropped the mandates, the vaccine mandates. Like if you weren't vaccinated, you couldn't go and sit down at a restaurant. You couldn't go to a movie. Most gyms wouldn't allow you in. So that was dropped, and they made the announcement. It was dropped at midnight of the day they made the announcement. So basically an effective, immediate announcement, and very much a result of the pressure from the truckers. But the truckers, they're not just standing for themselves. They want all vaccine mandates to be dropped. A lot of the language employed by our Premier, Jason Kenney, who made the announcement that would be dropped, was about variants and a potential return, and all based on numbers. There was a lot of ifs and buts. And that's not what these folks were asking for. They also wanted mask mandates gone immediately. So I'd consider it the folks here would likely consider it a battle won, but not the war won. So they're not going anywhere. They're doing this for all Canadians, not just Albertans. And they said they're in it for the long haul. Repeatedly, they have said they don't care if they go to jail or worse. They are going to stand their ground peacefully and continue to protest.
Well, now, I'm going to throw everybody for the loop. Kerry, let me ask you a question. Why the hell didn't this kind of thing start in Texas, where you are? Texas seems like they were slacking on this. This seems like a perfect protest, because I've been, the 35, there's a couple trucks on that. And it seems like it's got the kind of thing, the come and take it mentality that Texans have. But this, do you agree, Kerry, that Canada's been absolutely inspirational in a way that...
Absolutely inspirational.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and
Kerry.
I think it didn't start here because we had a mask mandate for a short time in Texas, but most of the places outside of Austin, in my experience, did not enforce it. So I've never really worn a mask this whole time. I could count on one hand the number of times I've put one on, and we didn't have a border where truckers were being required to get a vaccine to cross that border to come into Texas. I think if we had seen something that restrictive, that authoritarian here, you would have seen that Texas resistance. But I think people are lazy, and until they get pushed across, everybody has a different line, and until you cross that line for them, you're not going to see people stand up until things are taken that far, until that many things are taken from them, and that didn't happen here.
Now, so Adam, do you guys have a sense, as a Canadian, do you guys have a sense that the world has your back, particularly people in America, that this has done more to generate goodwill for Canada than anything since a Gordon Lightfoot album, right? But do you guys have that sense that really a lot of people are being inspired by what you guys are doing, Adam?
100%. We've got journalists around the world. Even in Australia, there's been truck convoys that are basically tributes or copycats of what's happening here. The sentiment among these people is that it is very much the world and the truckers versus Justin Trudeau and the state-funded media. When we speak to people in the streets, when we talk to people here, even when we talk to these cops, there's mischaracterizations of this movement around. When we talk to people on the ground, it's all everyone's bringing food for free. You do not go hungry here. Everyone's taking care of each other, that sentiment that the support is reverberating around the world is pretty self-evident. I think to your point earlier about this seeming like something right out of Texas, the people who were concerned about the government's mandates here in Canada at the very beginning, they were very often Eastern Europeans, people who felt the boot of oppressive governments, people who escaped that and came here, and we're starting to see that here. Canadians, however, we did not fight for our freedom. We politely asked for it versus Americans who claimed their freedom. So very much, I think there is a sort of apathetic mindset among Canadians that freedom is a default position. It is certainly not, it's the exception to most of human history and something that must be fought for. So I do suspect that the radical nature of Justin Trudeau and the liberal media that's funded by him have fed into a sense of sort of awakening among people in this country who are now vigilantly guarding their freedoms and will continue to again. So in their efforts to what they call curb COVID-19, ultimately what they've done with their overreaching, with some of their rhetoric, is wake people up to the fact that government indeed cannot be trusted.
Now, let me just say one other thing before I throw it to you, Kerry. Canada is known, of course, for a number of great actors. And, of course, I'm thinking people like Rick Moranis and William Shatner. But do you know who's a bad Canadian actor? Is this Justin Trudeau guy. I was watching him this morning, and I'm sure you saw this, Adam, where he was out there. It was like he was acting like almost like he was going to cry, like, I understand, we're all sick of this. But they're sick of you, Justin Trudeau. You're the one doing this. Did you see him blubbering it up in front of the cameras about how tired everybody is of the restrictions and everything? Like he's feeling I don't think any of this stuff has really affected Justin Trudeau. Do you think Justin Trudeau is going to get in any political trouble? Be honest. Is there going to be any feedback, fallout for Justin Trudeau, Adam?
You know, up until yesterday, I probably would have said maybe not. Unfortunately, there's so much funding. In fact, most media outlets are drying up and going out of business. We're growing, and we don't take a cent from the government. So that tells you how much people are consuming our media versus theirs. But the media party and the Liberal Party of Canada, which is Justin Trudeau's political party, ironically, there's nothing liberal about them. They're very indoctrinating and stifling. No freedom there. But they have been so exempt from any consequences. We've never had a prime minister with an ethics violation in history, to the best of my understanding. Justin Trudeau has several. This is a man who's worn blackface. This is a man who said that these truckers are Nazis when, hey, a bunch of them are Sikhs, Muslims, and every other imagination of person you could conjure. This is a very diverse crowd of people. But this guy is the chief Olympic champion of the Victimhood Olympics. This is all he does. He's always the victim. When he's vilifying people, when he's condemning people, when he's causing people to lose their jobs, we have talked to thousands of people who have lost their jobs, lost everything, and there has been an increase in even people taking their own lives within this country because of the dire straits that have been brought about by these vaccine mandates. And Justin Trudeau, who among the elite political class has been sitting in his ivory tower, virtually unfettered by everything going along, the fact that he has the audacity to come out and act as though he's the victim and put on the waterworks, it's really despicable, and it's really in line with his character. So I don't find that surprising at all.
Yeah, Carrie?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask about him too. I saw a quote of his yesterday, and Adam, I don't speak Canadian, so I was wondering if you could translate it. He said, I can understand frustrations with mandates, but mandates are the way to avoid further mandates or restrictions. What does that mean?
Yeah. That sounds awfully like Orwellian newspeak. The people who have adopted these agendas, and we've talked about this before in our live streams and stuff, but the people who are on board with the stuff Justin Trudeau says, the narrative can change from one week to the next. We can go from war to Eurasia with East Asia. It doesn't matter. They will believe whatever he says at the moment. So literally a statement as absurd as mandates are the way to ensure there's no further mandates makes sense to these people. To an American or a sane Canadian, that does not make sense. It absolutely doesn't. While the rest of the world, we're seeing Fauci seem like a moderate compared to Justin Trudeau. He's even said things like, well, it's not going to be boosters forever. It's not going to be masks forever. Justin Trudeau bought something to the effect of, I think, and don't quote me on this, but I think it was 400 million doses of vaccines for a nation of 42 million people. So that's 10 per, and that's including men, women, children, everybody. So this guy has effectively been reduced to a vaccine salesman, and nothing he says heads in any direction other than everyone needs to get more vaccines, even when the world is trending away from that, even when people couldn't travel unless they were vaccinated, and Omicron still spread, thereby this spread was occurring because of, guess what, the vaccinated people, because certainly the unvaccinated people couldn't travel. Despite all of this, despite the world shifting, despite the world starting to open up, and provinces, even very liberal provinces in Canada, starting to drop vaccine mandates, Justin Trudeau is all on board with vaccine mandates no matter what. And I don't know if he'll ever drop that. And I don't know if he'll ever really pay the consequences for what he's doing here, because there's clearly something more nefarious going on here in the fact that the world is changing, but Justin Trudeau seems to be the only one still parroting these talking points. But on your question of political accountability, in the last few days we have started to see even members within liberal mainstream media strongly questioning what's going on, and this is coming out as we speak. I've not reviewed the documents myself, but some members within his own Liberal Party have apparently begun to call out some of the double standards, some of his authoritarian strategies, and some of the problems that are taking place in Parliament in Canada.
Now, Adam, let me also ask, because the Rebel, now, again, I've known about the Rebel for a number of years, and I sort of said it's like the Canadian Breitbart News in the sense that there's a lot of correspondence. You guys do a lot more video than Breitbart used to when I was there. But have you guys experienced any censorship? Because you're right. People right now, I guarantee you, across Canada, they're not turning to the CBC, despite the fact there may be some CanCon on there. They're turning to you guys, right? Are you guys experiencing any censorship or threats of censorship at the Rebel right now, Adam?
Well, we have on both some federal levels from our own government and from some larger tech corporations. For example, lots of our content on YouTube, we have to actually cut partway through and then encourage people to go watch the full video on Rumble. Basically, as soon as Biden was elected, YouTube stopped pretending they cared about freedom of speech whatsoever, and they basically started censoring people. So there's this laundry list that we have to be extremely careful, and if any of the content delves into that, we're certainly still going to put it out, but we cut at that point in the video and we'll direct elsewhere. There's also been efforts, for example, in our last federal debates for our leadership, very much like your presidential debates, except there would be more parties involved, so often 4 or 5 different parties sort of echoing their concerns. The selection committee that allowed media access effectively declined access to all Rebel News participants from asking questions. So we challenged them in federal court, and a federal court ruling effectively stated that Rebel News is every bit as much media as CBC. In fact, the judge went on to say that state-funded media very possibly has a greater invested interest and more sort of conflict of interest in their reporting, and that we must therefore be included. So we've done that twice, actually. We've legally challenged and won the government for the rights and challenged the government and effectively the election committee that allows media in. And we've won twice, and federal courts have ruled that we are very much journalists and that we are very much allowed to participate and ask questions. So no lack of effort in attempting to silence us, but very much like that, I don't know if you're familiar with the Streisand effect, but every time they try and shut us down, more and more people just keep on looking.
Now, Kerry, we only have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to throw it to you to sort of cap things off here before I make a rush joke coming up. But Kerry Smith, any questions for Adam Sows from the Rebel up in Canada?
Yeah, just where would you send people if they want to follow what's happening or if they want to support the truckers?
Yeah, so rebelnews.com is always great to find all the content we produce, but truckerlawyer.ca is the URL that we have set up. It is where all the content will be posted, so you can make sure you're staying up to date. It's also where people can donate if they want to help with the crowdfunding efforts. Obviously, we saw GoFundMe take away some of these funds. If these people do get tickets, they're taking time away from work, they're stepping aside to fight for their freedoms. We want to ensure that they don't get bullied because they can't afford to hire a good lawyer. So we're crowdfunding lawyers. We're now taking on any truckers in Ottawa or any truckers here in southern Alberta who receive a ticket or are arrested, which could be quite a few. We've agreed to crowdfund lawyers for all of those people so that they will have their right. They will have very much the government attempting to stifle these people. Well, we're going to ensure that they have the best lawyers in their corner if the government does indeed incur on their right to stand up and protest. So truckerlawyer.ca is the spot to go for that content.
Now, Adam, I was going to say that, I talked about the come and take it mythos from Texas, but I will say this. Not only did Rush and the album Crest of Steel do the song Bastille Day, because of the French influence on Canada, the Bastille is something that is in Canadian consciousness, is it not?
Yeah, that very much. I mean, I was watching Grand Tour recently, and I think they called it the bloody mindedness. We're seeing in Ottawa that some of the most outspoken are coming from Quebec. Quebec, the French part of this country, at one point was talking about an additional tax, charging more taxes towards unvaccinated people, and that sentiment of the French Revolution arose quickly. There's a quote, and it applies to French Canadians, but Canadians broadly, about the French that says something to the effect of, how do you govern a people who have 250 types of cheese? Very much ungovernable people. The freedom sentiment is in the air. And it's interesting, very often French Canada, Quebec, and Alberta are placed at odds, but on this front of freedom, they seem certainly unified. And I think a new camaraderie has been born, and the Ottawa Liberals better watch out when the Quebecers from the east and the Albertans from the west are working together for freedom.
That's the equivalent in Canada of Compton, Long Beach. Now you know you're in trouble, by the way. For any Snoop fans out there. Adam Stiles from The Rebel, great appearance. Thanks so much.
Listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Good evening. Welcome to the Critical Hour. We're coming to you from the United States of America, Washington, D.C., here on Radio Sputnik. I'm political scientist, author, and nationally syndicated columnist Dr. Wilmer Leon. I'm joined here by my co-host, political analyst